Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, belated birthday vibes. Belated birthday vibes. Thank you for those of you that shouted me out happy birthday. And those of you who cash at me. You are the real MVPs. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. All right, we're going to keep the party going. This is day 35 of 100 days in a row. I am Kirk Kennedy. Welcome to CNN. I'll be your host, Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. All right, before you label me a heretic, hear me out. Hear me out. I think Christians need to stop telling other Christians to trust God or trust the Lord. And I want to explain why. So I was in a conversation with someone earlier today, and they brought up a point that they were going through some challenges. And they said that people were telling them they got to trust God. And this individual just humbly said to me, like, what does that even mean? What does that mean? And I've had this thought for a while, and I've said it in different circles, but I was able to walk this person through that. So I want to talk with you today about the problem with telling Christians to trust the Lord or to trust God. Here's the real problem. First of all, the phrase is biblical. Don't get me wrong. If you go to any concordance, or if you have Bible software like I do, like Logos, you will see trust the Lord, trust God. But there's one problem when we say it, right? There's one problem. When we say trust the Lord or trust God, it becomes a catch-all phrase. It becomes just one size fits all. And on one level, you can say, sure, you need to trust God. But the problem is, and what this person was sharing with me is, what's the application? What do you mean by trust the Lord? What does that look like? This is the problem with trusting God and trusting the Lord. The language is it's a couple of phrases, and you expect the person to know how to do that and what that means, right? That's the problem with saying you got to trust the Lord. Well, how do I trust the Lord? How do you trust God? How do you trust the Lord in this particular circumstance, whatever it is, right? How do you trust the Lord? Are you just waiting for the Lord to give you an audible voice? What's the mechanism in which that happens? And I think a lot of people use this term, you got to trust the Lord and trust God. And it's true and it sounds godly, but what it does is it leaves a lot of people who are believers confused. I agree with, I really believe this, that telling people to trust God without telling people how to trust God is like someone having tongues without an interpretation. Trusting God is true, but it is not a one-size-fits-all reality. It's not just trust the Lord. Well, how do I do that? That's what most people need to know. What do you mean by trust the Lord? What do I say, think, or do to demonstrate trust in the Lord? And every situation is not the same thing. It's not the same thing. We have to make trust the Lord be specific. So here's what I said to this individual. After they told me that people kept saying, trust the Lord, and they said, I have no idea what that means. Like, how do I do that in this situation? And I said, well, most times when people say trust the Lord, here's the problem with that statement. Most of our relationship with God is transactional, right? We're asking for something from God and we're waiting to see if he answers that. And so a lot of times when people are saying trust the Lord, they're saying wait for him to give you some sign or something. But the problem with that is it eliminates faith. Don't get me wrong. It's cool to pray to the Lord, ask the Lord these things. We should do that. It's good to get counsel from people that we think have wisdom. But at the end of the day, without faith, it's impossible to please God. So if you're waiting for the Lord to always tell you what to do, then it's no longer faith, it's sight, right? The Lord is pleased by you believing that he exists, and he rewards those who diligently seek him. So what does it mean? So I said to this person, they said, well, what do I do in this situation? I said, listen, biblically speaking, 99% of what it means to trust the Lord is not waiting for an answer from him. That's not what it means. 99% of what trust the Lord means, biblically speaking, is obey the things that are clear in the Bible despite your temptation to not do so. When you're thinking about what does trust the Lord mean, I told this person, ask yourself, what fruits of the Spirit do I need to demonstrate in this situation? God's not worried about, listen, let me just say this, man. God doesn't break his promises. What he does is he breaks our desires that we've made promises, right? God never promises us that we'll, first of all, suffering is a promise. He never promises us that our kids will grow up and be saved indefinitely. He never promises that we won't get cancer or get falsely accused or we won't die before it's time. He never promises us we will have kids when we get married or we will get married. He doesn't promise us. These are desires that we turn into promises. And people have hijacked Romans 8:28 to make you think that, oh, this means that because God works together for your good, that means you just got to wait on God, girl. It's like, nah, God might be like, you're not having that. You're not getting that. And that's part of the challenge. And so when you are trusting God, it's most of us think we got to wait for God to give us a sign. But God is saying, listen, just be obedient, right? Just be obedient. Just what are the fruits of the Spirit that you need to have in this situation? So I told this individual, look, there's many ways to trust the Lord. There's many ways. But the one way that is always biblical is figuring out what does obedience look like in this situation. So I personally, what I do is I think, man, what fruit of the Spirit is this? Let me give you an example. I was just in an irritable mood last week. I was sitting at the table with my wife. She was right over here. And my sons were around the table. And I was just irritated. I was irritated. And I was almost ready to pick a fight with my wife because she tempted me in some way. I can't remember what it was. So I was sitting at the table and she was saying something to the boys. I just didn't like how she was saying it. And it was really me. So I was getting irritated. And I was about to make one of these sarcastic comments to kind of belittle her a little bit on the sneak, just to kind of start a little fight. And when I realized that's what I was getting ready to do, without anyone paying attention to me, I just quietly said to the Lord, Lord, please help me. I'm struggling right now. What fruit of the Spirit? What's the action of love that's required of me right now? That's the question I said. Lord, what is the action? And I went through the list. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not insist on its own way. Love is not rude. And I said, you know what? There it is. Love is not rude, and love does not insist on its own way. So I took a breath, and then I didn't say anything. And then I just asked my wife, hey, do you want me to go get you something? Oh, that's what it was. I had to go to the grocery store to grab something that my wife didn't grab when she went, when she could have, and I was frustrated. So I was like, I was ready to just pick a fight and just say something slick and just let her know I didn't like it. But instead I was like, okay, Lord, what's the action of love that's required right now? So what does trusting the Lord look like in that moment? It's not sinning against him and my wife. Sometimes we think that the Lord's plan is to guide us through everything, and that's not true. The Lord's plan is he'll be with us through everything, and sometimes he'll make it clear what we should do, and sometimes he just doesn't. He just doesn't. He does not make it clear, but we wait. In Hebrews 11, it talks about there were people who did not receive what was promised. So God actually made them promises that they didn't receive in his life. But they said that they were beaten, sawn in two. They were in sackcloth and ashes. The world rejected them. So the world was not worthy of them, and God was not ashamed to be called their God. They were actually promised things that they didn't receive, and they still trusted the Lord. So in other words, trusting the Lord or trusting God is not a catch-all phrase. If you can't be specific, when you tell someone to trust God, it might be that you don't know how to do it. You've gotten so used to Christian colloquialisms that you just use these phrases. Trust God, you got to trust the Lord. But then you get all anxious and worried, like, be specific. Don't hide behind Christian colloquialisms, right? Be specific. Think about, okay, when you tell someone you got to trust the Lord, tell them how you do it, or give them an example of what to do in the situation, because that's what most people are looking for. Most believers are not thinking, oh, I didn't know to trust the Lord. Thanks for telling me that phrase. Most people don't struggle with trusting the Lord because they don't know that that phrase is in the Bible 117 times. Most people don't know what trusting the Lord looks like in a particular situation. So I feel like for me, I spend most of my time thinking through my own heart how to do that, and then trying to help others be specific, right? Be specific. Make trust the Lord, that phrase, or trust God, make it specific. And if you can't, it could be that it's not specific for you, and you need to spend some time thinking through, when I trust the Lord, what does that look like? I promise you, 99% of trusting the Lord is going to look like demonstrating a fruit of the Spirit in the situation where you're tempted not to. Just trusting the Lord means act the way the Lord wants you to act, even though you're really tempted and don't want to. Like I did when I was with my wife. Now, there are times I fail. So I'm not sitting here like I'm not Moses coming out of the mountain with 2 stone tablets telling y'all what to do. But I'm committed to honoring the Lord. And there are times you fail, but then there are times you don't. But if we don't make things specific, then look to the cross, stand at the feet of the cross, look to Jesus. Those are all biblical things, but what does that mean? Tell someone what to think, or how to act, what to say. Think in terms of that when you're telling people to trust the Lord. Otherwise, it just becomes confusing. For some people, I'm telling you, telling people to trust God, trust the Lord, without how to do that is like someone speaking in tongues and then no one has an interpretation. And you just sit there and be like, well, I know that was tongues, and if you believe in tongues today, and I know that. No, people need specifics. Give them specificity. And if you don't have it, it could be that you haven't disciplined yourself to be specific. Be specific. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But be specific when you do that, all right? All right, I'm getting ready to go take my kids to see Guardians of the Galaxy Part 3. That's how we get down. I'm sorry if you don't like Disney and Marvel and all that. Bring it up with the Lord, but we going to see it. You know what I'm saying? But what do I know? I don't know. What do I know? What do I know? I just got a text from my wife right now checking to see if I did something I was supposed to do. Look how the Lord is testing me. You can't handle the truth, ladies and gentlemen. I'm out of here. Grace and peace, y'all. Trust the Lord and tell us how to do it.